Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video. Today we have a pretty awesome knife in front of the camera. This is, of course, the Custom Knife Factory Morrf 4. Now, I've had quite a number of Custom Knife Factory knives, and overall, I've got to say, they generally do a great job with fit and finish and tolerances and attention to detail and all of those little things we pay attention to in high-end knives. However, sometimes their designs can be a little out there, okay? And so for the person that's more of a user than a collector, that's gonna put some people off, okay? This knife, though, is a little different for them in that it's a little plainer, a little smaller, and I would say a little more practical in its size, in its shape, and just the overall design in general. Because of that, though, this knife has been pretty popular ever since the Morrf 1, and the Morrf 4 maybe is even more so than some of the others because of the finishes on it make it a knife that's going to hold up to use really, really well. So possibly this is, and maybe, by the way, there's also price to consider, and this is definitely on the more budget-friendly end of the Custom Knife Factory spectrum. Now, I'm not saying it's a budget-friendly knife. It's still pretty expensive. But compared to other knives from this company, it's a little more comfortable on the wallet. So because of all that, I would suggest that perhaps this is their most practical, their most EDCable, and their most broadly appealing design. And certainly, I would say the availability of these kind of indicates that that happens to be the case. These are really, really popular and can be a little hard to get a hold of. So let's go ahead and start pointing out some of the features that make it that practical. Beginning with the size, this is a smaller knife for them at 8¼ inches overall. Blade length on this is 3.5. Notice though, let me set this down so I can point, that measured from here to the tip, it's 3.5 inches, but the blade, the sharpened edge does extend a bit past that, so you end up with more like 3¾ inches of actual cutting edge. Handle on this guy is 4 13/16. It's about ½ inch thick and it weighs 4.85 ounces. Now, that's a little lighter than maybe expected when you consider the thickness of this blade and the fairly robust titanium scales or frame. But you can see that it's pretty heavily milled out internally to save some of that weight. And so I've got to say I really appreciate that. So pretty easy knife to use and pretty easy knife to carry from a size and weight perspective. Let's go ahead now and talk about the blade. And I will say, let me comment to begin that this blade looks a little tactical, maybe a little stabby. But the reality is the same things that make this knife look maybe a little aggressive also make it really useful. So, the offset from the handle means that if you're cutting on a surface, it works really well. The full belly means that it slices exceptionally well. And this sort of standard back, straight back, standard shape gives you that really fine point for, those details like opening a clamshell package or something like that. Now, I know that those details also can make this knife look a little bit what would you say, a little bit aggressive or a little bit tactical, although I'm not a fan of that word tactical. I use it because it's the accepted nomenclature. Anyway, gotta say about this knife, and in general comment on that, this discussion tends to come up, and the reality is that things that are made to be, for combat, often share qualities that make them good for combat that also make them good as a utility tool. If you think of an AR-15, it's just a great utility rifle. The same things that make it good in a combat situation also make it good in the bush and in a hunting situation. And I think that's the kind of what's happening with this. And I said the same thing about the Cold Steel Talwar. It looks really aggressive and really, slicey and like it's made for attacking people. But the reality is it's extremely utilitarian. And I would say that about this blade and really this overall knife as well. Let's move on now to lockup and deployment. We've talked about the blade and, I didn't say much about the finish, but the finish on this blade, again, does make it nice as a user because this finish as a fairly light stonewash is just going to hold up and not show a lot of wear or a lot of use, which is very appreciated in a knife that you plan to carry and use. Lockup and deployment on this, overall, let me say it's just very good, okay? I'll start with the thing that probably is the best feature to me and then sort of work through some of the others. The detent is where I want to start because it is exceptional. The detent on this is really, really dialed in. It just breaks and the knife or the blade flies out of the handle. It's exceptionally well done. I would compare it to the detent on my Riat Torrent, my Riat Knives Torrent. Same thing. When that detent breaks, it just deploys extremely well. I've got a few other knives that are like that as well. But I've just got to say the detent on this is exceptional. Single row ceramic bearings in here do make the knife nice and smooth. Not quite as smooth as some of the knives I've felt that have maybe roller bearings or dual or even triple row bearings. But certainly very good. Stainless steel lock bar insert means you're going to get a good connection with no or very little wear over time. Lock bar cutout and lock bar tension are pretty well right where they need to be. I do appreciate the fact that they've left a little extra material in that cutout. I think that just adds some structural integrity to the knife and some longevity to the number of times you're going to be able to actuate that lock without causing wear. So all of the things related to the performance of the lockup and the deployment, I've got to say, are pretty well exactly what you'd want. The one minor issue that I may have is this is quite rounded here. It makes it really comfortable. So if you're a guy who's going to play with your knife a lot, unlocking the knife is not painful or uncomfortable. But maybe a little bit of light jimping here would be appreciated, as it's very smooth and rounded. Not that it's hard to do or that I've ever failed, but just a little bit of positive traction there might be appreciated. Moving on with the handle of the knife, we've got, of course, titanium frame lock construction. It is standoffs, which I do appreciate, nicely milled out, which we've already mentioned, and a milled pocket clip, single side. And by the way, there's a reasonably good sized lanyard hole there. So those are sort of the features. Torx bit construction, which again is appreciated. Now that's the construction. The finish here is a very nice stonewash, and it's actually a good stonewash finish. Adds some grip for sure to the material. The jimping, of course, really works. And I didn't mention this on the blade because it's more of an ergonomic feature, but this is a knife with extremely positive retention. You know, this is a knife that sort of, when you grab it, it really molds to your hand and you've really got a hold of it. And that's true both in a saber grip as well as a reverse grip. Extremely comfortable in both of those. Hammer grip is certainly acceptable, not as nice. You know, this is a design that, you know, you can just sort of see your thumb just naturally flows right into that little indent there. So yeah, ergonomics on this, really good. There's no hot spots. Everything is nicely contoured. The grip is very positive. You don't feel at all like you're gonna, you know, drop it or lose it, even if you're in, you know, some kind of dire circumstance where, you know, maybe it's covered in sweat or blood or dirt or whatever. I don't generally use this knife for those kinds of things, but I suppose if you really had a need for that, the grip is there to allow for it. And so, by the way, there is this nice little bit of milling on the back of the clip, which I do appreciate. As well, from a styling standpoint, since we're kind of talking about this, the knife does kind of flow together really nicely with that sort of offset blade. The lines cut into the blade here, as well as into the show side of the pivot screw. So yeah, from a design standpoint, it also looks pretty nice. A little more contrast would be appreciated. Now there's a bit here. This is, the stonewash here is a little finer, and therefore this is a little shinier than the stonewash on the titanium. But I would have appreciated maybe a more polished look on the blade to kind of stand out from the stonewash titanium. I think it's enough that it's okay, and certainly the benefits here I think kind of outweigh the aesthetic value of a satin blade. I prefer, you know, satin is my favorite blade finish. And I think this knife would look great with a satin finish. However, there is, of course, the utility of a stone wash that is very much appreciated. Let's go ahead and get to some comparisons now, and then I'll kind of give you my overall thoughts on the knife. So, a couple other sort of overseas produced knives to start us off. There's the Riat Knives Torrent back. And again, really, really well done. This is another company that tends to really just nail it when it comes to quality and fit and finish. Now, I will say this is a little higher price point, and one of the things that's coming with that higher price point is some more interesting, compelling detail. And I've got to say, overall, in terms of high-end production knives, this is certainly on my short list of favorite knives. Really, really exceptional. But yeah, a little more pricey. Something that's maybe closer, in fact, I think I would say probably a little cheaper, but not quite as well done would be the WE Knives. This is the 601. Of course, there are a number of them. And overall, I would say the performance in general, although very good, is not quite to the same level as something from Custom Knife Factory. You know, these are just dialed in and are nearly perfection. These feel very good and they're nice and smooth. The detent, of course, is a little soft. And of course, there's always a lot of extra stuff going on. I think WE Knives has that in common with Custom Knife Factories, as they tend to be really out there in their designs, and in that sense, maybe not as appealing to a broader audience. However, you know, both of these are very well made. I would say the Custom Knife Factory in general is just a slight step up. To move into something made here in the US, well, I'm in Canada, but here in North America, we've got ZT, and any number of ZTs could be here in this comparison. Certainly you're getting most of the same high-end features, getting really good feel, really nice detent, high-end, great steel, of course, on this one. And of course, coming in at a much more budget-friendly price point, but you are going to sacrifice a little in terms of, you know, just that level of quality and fit and finish. Another really nice carry titanium frame lock flipper is, of course, the Curtis F3. The Curtis is a little more dialed in, just overall has a feeling that's, I don't know, not... It's just different, okay? You can feel something about this knife that just says quality to an even greater level than the Custom Knife Factory, even though I would not argue for a second that the Custom Knife Factory is extremely good. What else have we got here? A couple more to share with you. Another knife that, you know, has some of the interesting stylings of the Custom Knife Factory knives would be this Brian Ty and Friends, sorry, TIE Fighter. Again, a great knife, really nice flipping action, really interesting in terms of details, while still being, the reason I think this knife is comparable is that this is a really interesting, really cool, really compelling knife that is still a great EDC. You know, I carry and use this knife an awful lot. It's certainly been in many of my most carried videos. And so again, it gives you all of the joy that comes from a really well-made tool while still being very usable and practical. One last knife here, and that is the XM18. And again, this falls into the same category for me. A really high-end, high-quality tool that I would never, that I would feel totally comfortable using and do carry and use all the time. So there you go, guys. There's a few comparisons. I think we're all over the map in terms of price point. So there's a few things there for the person who says, hey, this is a little too expensive. And then there's a few things there for someone who wants to spend a little bit more. Overall, guys, this knife deserves the popularity that it has. It is really, really well done. You know, attention to detail, ergonomics, blade shape, blade steel, you know, everything is right where it needs to be. And this is one of those knives, along with a few others, the Riat Knives Valkyrie, this knife, the Olamic Wayfarer, and a few others that I would list, even the Torrent here. These really personify what a high-end production knife should be. And so if you like the look of this knife, the shape of this knife, I would not hesitate. They're exceptionally well done. Certainly as good as anything else out there in that it competes with, and better than a lot because of the fact that this is one, a little more affordable, but two, a little more practical and a little more carryable. There you go, guys. That's my take on the Custom Knife Factory Morrf 4. A total win from Custom Knife Factory. And, you know, it'd be neat to see them do a few other things along these lines. A little smaller, you know, a little more practical, not quite as flashy. Certainly very much appreciated by me, and I'm sure a few others out there. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.